started. There are so many top headlines left to get to as well. We want to keep, though, our coverage focused on the 2024 presidential election. We're turning to someone who has correctly called all but one election since 1984. That's, of course, our friend Allan Lichtman, distinguished professor at American University. He joins me. Professor Lichtman, thanks for being with us here. I know you've been on TV a lot lately with some of these prognostications and projections here, and going over your 13 keys. I want to put them up here, and the book that you just wrote, Predicting the Next President here. So some of these keys include party mandate, contest, incumbency, third party, the short-term economy, the long-term economy, social unrest, scandal, foreign and military failures, foreign and military successes, incumbent charisma, and challenger charisma. How did you come up with these 13, and why 13?
I came up with them purely by accident. In 1981, I was distinguished visiting scholar at Caltech in Southern California, and met the world's leading authority on earthquake prediction, Volodya Kailas-Borak. And the two of us became the odd couple of American political research, applying the methodology of earthquake prediction to predicting elections. And this led to two things. Number one, reconceptualizing presidential elections. If you're going to pioneer a new way of looking at a phenomenon, you need to reconceptualize it. So this is 1981. We looked at presidential elections not as Carter versus Reagan, Republican versus Democrat, liberal versus conservative, but in earthquake terms, as stability, the party holding the White House stays in power, earthquake, they're booted out of power. With that in mind, we used the methods of earthquake prediction, pattern recognition, to see what patterns were associated with earthquake and stability, going all the way back to the horse and buggy days of politics, when Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860 to the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980. And that procedure led to the 13 keys. 13 true-false questions where an answer of true always favors the White House party. And the basic idea is American presidential elections are essentially votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party.
So
that's what our 15 keys did, and a simple decision rule. 6 keys that are negative or more, the White House party is a predicted loser.
I see. You know, we were showing the live picture there of the beast there on the tarmac in Houston. President Biden's inside. How much did his withdrawal from the election change the keys in question here? Or maybe they didn't. I mean, what factors do you have to re-look at now after this decision, just what, now 2 weeks ago?
Yes. The decision definitely affected my keys because by Biden stepping down and not resigning, the Democrats lost key number 3, the incumbency key. It's an open seat. But the Democrats, after their shameful trashing of their incumbent president, got smart and united behind VP Harris. That preserved key number 2, the contest key. So they only lost 1 key. Moreover, there does seem to be some new enthusiasm inserted by Harris, the much younger candidate. And that, I believe, might well dampen enthusiasm for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., helping to preserve the third-party key for the incumbent party. And perhaps not with the sitting president at front and center, it might dampen the idea of widespread, massive social unrest, also preserving another key. So right now, a lot would have to go wrong for the Democrats to lose this election. It could happen, and I won't make my final prediction until after the Democratic convention in late August.
Okay, you know, Allan, something that I've kind of noticed and observed and heard a lot of people talking about throughout the course of the cycle, even with Biden still in, and now Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee, that this was a 2-incumbent race with Biden and Trump. Can you make that argument now that Harris is also an incumbent in her own right, as is Trump here? Is this Was this a three incumbent race and now back to a two incumbent race here? You know, without getting into the technical weeds here, that's a phenomenon we really haven't seen.
I got it. Look, anyone is free to develop their own prediction system. But if you're going to use the keys, you got to stick to the way the keys are defined on my book, which you so nicely advertised at the beginning. And the incumbency key is a binary key. You're either the incumbent or not. It doesn't count if you're the vice president or if you were once previously an incumbent. So George H.W. Bush, for example, the sitting vice president in 1988 did not win the incumbency key. And when Grover Cleveland, after losing the incumbency, like Trump, ran again, he didn't win the incumbency key either.
You know, I wanted to ask you, though, about the keys. Who has the most right now in your projections and your estimations here? And is that subject to change? What, we're 99 days away from the election? You know, going back on the news of the last month, that's an eternity here. Is it apt to change, do you think, much?
You know, the keys are the Northern Star of political prediction.
Sure.
They don't change easily, but I will tell you exactly where the keys stand now and what to look for. Right now, the Democrats are down 3 keys. The mandate key, because they lost U.S. House seats, the incumbency key that we talked about, and the incumbent charisma key, because no matter what you may think of Harris, she's not an FDR converting vast numbers of the opposition. That means 3 more keys would have to fall to predict their defeat. Possible, but not likely. Here are the 4 keys that are still undecided. Third party. RFK Jr. would have to stabilize at least 10% of the polls. That's the only time I use the polls because I have to. Possible, but unlikely. Massive social unrest. We saw some sporadic social unrest in the spring. It's fizzled. Will there be massive social unrest like in the 60s or during the Black Lives Matter movement? Possible, but unlikely. Then we have the 2 shakiest keys, foreign/military failure and foreign/military success. So right now, of the 4 uncertain keys, 2 are certainly leaning towards the Democrats, 2 may be leaning the other way. But remember, it takes 3 to count out the Democrats. That's why I'm saying a lot would have to go wrong for them to lose. But stay tuned for my final prediction after the Democratic convention.
Okay, that was my next question. You know, when is that coming? We'll get that after the DNC. You know, Allan, I'm kind of curious, too. You projected that Donald Trump would win in 2016. That was contrary to the conventional wisdom and the polling at the time. How do 2024 stack up to his 2 previous runs for the White House? Do you see similarities and or differences here? Is it more of the same? Or, like some analysts have observed, this is a new Trump. Do you see that, too, or no?
Well, every 4 years, someone says to me, this year is different. Got to change your keys. Never had an African-American running. America's not ready to elect an African-American. We got to have a woman. That's brand new. Social media. We've never seen a candidate like Trump. And my keys, retrospectively, as I point out, go back to 1860. So they've survived enormous changes. That's why I don't change them on the fly. That's a recipe for disaster. But if you're asking me for an hysterical analogy, 1968, the last time an incumbent withdrew. Lyndon Johnson withdrew, though, in March, not on the eve of the Democratic convention. And that led to a series of disasters, you know, a disastrous struggle for the Democratic nomination, losing the contest key. It contributed to an explosion of social unrest at the Democratic convention. Of course, the cities were in flames, so they lost that key as well. So what the Democrats are trying to do now is avoid what happened in 1968. That's why they united behind Harris. And that's why they're doing their best to make sure that they have a successful convention, not a repeat of 1968. To follow all this, I have a live show every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern at Allan Lichtman YouTube.
You know, Allan, too, I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up today because the historical parallels are so kind of glaring. But President Biden was speaking at the LBJ Library in Austin, Texas, about Supreme Court reform. And now LBJ and President Biden are historically forever interlinked because, before Biden, LBJ was the most recent president, Democratic president at that, to not seek re-election. He did it in March of that year, Biden bowing out in late July. So I thought I just had to mention that kind of historical tidbit here. But, at that time, Allan, LBJ was the incumbent. And so Democrats are the incumbent. It seems like in your 13 keys, the incumbency factor is the most important. Do they all carry equal weight, or does one have more weight than the other?
The secret to the keys is they all have equal weight.
Okay.
When you weight a system like this, you create errors because the weights have to be based on past elections and the weights unpredictably change. The other secret to the keys is trigger effects. That is, the loss of one key can trigger others. So Lyndon Johnson withdrawing triggered the loss of the contest key. So it cost them 2 keys. That's what the Democrats have now avoided, learning the lessons of the keys from 1968.
So, depending on how 2024 goes, will you be somewhat more transparent about your methodology, so to speak? What goes into all of these outcomes and these decisions? Do you look at polling, or do you rely wholly on the history that is before us?
I rely primarily on the history.
Okay.
I almost never look at polling.
Okay.
Particularly, I never look at horse race polling because they are snapshots and they're abused as predictors. And many times I've gone against the polling. 2016, you mentioned.
Yeah.
Right after the Romney-Obama's disastrous first debate, the polls switched and it looked like Obama was going to lose. I stuck to Obama. 1988, George H.W. Bush fell 17 points behind Mike Dukakis in the late spring, early summer. I stuck to the keys and predicted a Bush win. The only time I use polls, because I have to, is for the third party, because I don't know, obviously, what the third party result is going to be, but I don't take them at face value. I cut the polling data in half. Take all the polls and all the punditry, which has no scientific basis, and do to it what the philosopher David Hume said, do to works of superstition. Consign them to the flames. Like in all those past elections, they lead you down the primrose path of error. Stick to a system like the keys, which is based on how elections really work.
All right. Allan, we're going to have you on after the DNC once you make some of these projections and predictions. Sir, thanks so much for your time. We'll talk soon.
My great pleasure. Great interview. Take care.